This anime begins with a young man named Hokaze-kan, who spends his long school holidays playing video games in his room. While playing, he encounters a female player named Flora who asks for his help in completing a mission. Hokaze, taken by her beauty, agrees to lend his aid but with the condition that she must meet him in the real world. To his surprise, after agreeing to help her, Hokaze is transported to another dimension. In this new world, a group of warriors, including a commander named Singlain, are escorting Princess Piria Ecarlate when they are ambushed by an army from a rival kingdom, led by a male commander named Variation. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Singlain remains steadfast in his duty to protect the princess, standing at the front line with his trusty sword. He will not hesitate to risk his life to ensure her safety, no matter the odds. After Singlain successfully fought off some of the enemy soldiers, the rest of the troops moved in to surround the princess, trapping him. With his sword pointed at Singlain, Variation demanded their surrender, leaving them with no escape. But in a lucky turn of events, Hokaze suddenly fell from the sky and landed on Variation, knocking him out. Seizing the opportunity, Singlain and the princess fled the scene, bringing Hokaze along with them. Confused and disoriented, Hokaze initially thought that everything he was experiencing was just a dream. However, the princess quickly corrected him with a whack on the head, introducing herself and her entourage, including her personal assistant, Mariandel, who caught Hokaze's eye with her stunning appearance. But when he made a flirtatious remark, she revealed that she was actually transgender, and to prove it, grabbed his hand and placed it down there. After failing to capture Princess Ecarlate, Variation reported back to his prince, Ericpile Dukakis, the leader of the faction known as Incognito, whose goal is to overthrow the Saint Empire and prevent the arranged political marriage between Princess Ecarlate and other kingdoms. Ericpile, intrigued by the young man who had defeated his top commander, Hokaze, decided to confront him personally and had his subordinates keep an eye on him and gather information. Meanwhile, Hokaze remained bewildered, struggling to understand how he ended up in this new world. With no memory of being transported and no knowledge of how to return to his own world, he was resigned to the fact that he may be trapped in this strange new place for the time being. During their journey to the Saint Imperial Palace, Singlain noticed that Hokaze was only wearing socks, so he made a stop at the town market to buy him a pair of shoes. As the story unfolded, Hokaze laid eyes on a pair of shoes with a dragon horn design, which he couldn't resist buying. Upon leaving the market, he was alerted by Singlain that they were being followed by two of Ericpile's men. Quickly taking action, Singlain defeated the men and handed Hokaze a sword for protection. When they continued on their journey, they were met with yet another ambush by Incognito warriors. Shortly after, Mariandel and Singlain stepped up to fight, but were no match for Ericpile, who had been lying in wait. With them down, Hokaze was forced to face off against him in a one-on-one duel. As the battle continued, Ericpile was taken aback as Hokaze's sword broke under the power of his magic sword, but Hokaze refused to give up and was ready to fight back. As Ericpile prepared for a powerful strike, Hokaze seized the opportunity to deliver a swift and forceful kick to his groin, causing him to fall to the ground in agony. Taking advantage of the situation, Hokaze claimed Ericpile's magic sword, Almagear, for himself. Impressed by Hokaze's bravery and skill, Princess Ecarlate decided to offer him a position as one of her royal knights, tasked with protecting the kingdom of Bur. Although he was hesitant at first and claimed that his victories were due to sheer luck, he was eventually forced to accept the offer by Singlain, who threatened to draw his sword against him if he refused. The next day, Ericpile woke up in a hospital bed, groggy and confused. As he slowly regained consciousness, he received devastating news from his physician. One of his testicles had been destroyed, leaving him with only one. The news was a shock to Ericpile, and he felt as though a crucial part of his masculinity had been taken from him. But what really inflamed him was the loss of his ancestral sword, Almagear, which was a valuable weapon in its own right, but also held great sentimental value to him. Fueled by anger and a desire for revenge, Ericpile vowed to find Hokaze and retrieve his stolen sword. He knew that Hokaze had taken more than just his family heirloom. He had taken a piece of Ericpile's pride and heritage. The Almagear was one of the magical swords, imbued with crystal stones that could harness the power of magic to enhance its wielder's attacks. Meanwhile, Princess Ecarlate informed Hokaze of the perilous state of their world. If balance was not maintained, it would face extinction and destruction. Impressed by Hokaze's victory over Variation and Prince Ericpile, Princess Ecarlate believed that Hokaze could be relied upon to help her preserve the balance of the world. Hokaze was quick to dismiss the princess's faith in him. He humbly claimed that his previous victories were merely due to luck, and begged her not to have high expectations of him. Just as he finished speaking, A massive explosion rocked the city. It was soon revealed that the blast was caused by a tank engine, created by none other than Prince Eric Pyle, who was seeking to confront Hokaze. On the other hand, Eric Pyle and his army arrived in the city center, where he issued a direct challenge to Hokaze. He asked Singlain and Mirandel to stay out of the fight, as it would be a one-on-one battle between him and Hokaze. However, as Eric Pyle attempted to fire his cannon at Hokaze, he found that all his shots were off target, hitting his own soldiers instead. Hokaze suspected that his balance had been disturbed by the loss of one of his testicles, causing him to struggle with proper aim. Recognizing the opportunity, other opponents urged Hokaze to take on Eric Pyle, confident that he would emerge victorious. Singlain would clear the way for Eric Pyle, while Hokaze prepared to attack with Eric Pyle's magic sword, Almagear. At first, Eric Pyle underestimated Hokaze, believing that only warriors known as Hyperion could activate the sword's power. But to his surprise, Hokaze was able to unlock the full potential of the Almagear, and he charged towards Eric Pyle's tank with newfound strength. Tragically, something unusual occurred once again. Hokaze stumbled, and the magic sword in his hand transformed into a mace. Eric Pyle, observing this situation, laughed with glee and prepared to fire a cannon at him. Fortunately, he managed to fend off the attack and even delivered a more potent strike, destroying Eric Pyle's tank. Fed up with his luck, Eric Pyle decided to face Hokaze head-on and charge towards him. However, Eric Pyle still struggled with his balance, causing all his sword slashes to miss their mark, even though Hokaze remained stationary. Taking advantage of the moment, Hokaze swiftly aimed the spiked mace at Eric Pyle's groin, causing him to fall to the ground. Upon seeing their leader lying helpless, his soldiers rushed him to the hospital and, per his orders, retreated from the battlefield. Actually, Hokaze was eager to engage the troop of soldiers, but Singlain forbade it as the opposing force of the Incognito faction was too formidable. However, unbeknownst to all, a curious woman accompanied by a monkey was observing the situation from afar. The woman then commanded her pet to keep a close eye on Hokaze's movements. The next morning, Eric Pyle was met with devastating news that one of his testicles had to be removed due to severe damage. Meanwhile, Hokaze and Princess Scarlet were on their way to the capital, seeking a way for him to return to the human world. Along the way, they were approached by a monkey, sent by the mysterious woman, and Mariandel, charmed by the monkey's youthful appearance, offered to take care of it. However, Hokaze tried to stop her, even throwing stones at the monkey in an attempt to drive it towards the forest. That evening, as Hokaze was resting at the inn, the blue monkey made another appearance. Despite his efforts to chase it away, he was unable to do so, as Mariandel and Singlain had already decided to take care of the baby monkey. In secret, Hokaze tried various methods to get rid of the animal, but his attempts always proved unsuccessful. Finally, he was forced to reveal the reason behind his aversion to pets. He confided that he once came across two kittens trapped in the rain behind a bush and took them in, only to have them reject all the love and care he showed them. Mariandel didn't believe this was a valid reason to harm or dislike other animals, and tried to persuade Hokaze to give the monkey cub a chance. When he tried to pet the monkey, it bit his hand. He once again tried to get rid of the animal, but it was too quick for him, effortlessly dodging his attacks and even stunning him with a single kick. One day, Eric Pyle visited the home of his fiancée, Amelia, where she inquired about his injuries sustained in the previous battle. He was troubled by the situation, as he had no way of disclosing to her that his testicles had been completely removed, which would have led to the termination of their engagement. On the same day, Eric Pyle's relatives, Limpus Daskas and Gabriella Daskas, came to see him after hearing about his recent battle. They were unaware of his condition, as he had requested his doctor to keep it a secret from his family, so they would not realize that he was no longer capable of having children. Shortly after, Limpus presented Eric Pyle with a box of medicine, claiming it was highly effective in treating battle wounds. However, the medicine was actually a potent aphrodisiac, and Limpus had deliberately given it to him with the intention of tempting him to sleep with Gabriella. Limpus aimed to disrupt Eric Pyle's engagement with Amelia and win her affections for himself, as he had loved her for a long time. Meanwhile, Gabriella also intended to get close to Eric Pyle in hopes of securing a more comfortable life as a princess in the Incognito faction. After Eric Pyle ingested the drug, Gabriella entered his bedroom and attempted to seduce him by undressing him. Meanwhile, Limpus pretended to catch the two of them together, so that Amelia would witness their supposed infidelity and think less of Eric Pyle. To restore his honor, he challenged Limpus to a duel and promised that if he emerged victorious, Limpus would have to confess his actions to Amelia. Then Limpus accepts the challenge from Eric Pyle with a sense of nonchalance. Despite the fierce battle, Ericpile proves himself to be a formidable opponent, defeating all of Olympus's reinforcements and forcing him to confess to his misdeeds. In a last-ditch effort, he tries to strike Ericpile with a low blow, but his attack fails as Ericpile had taken precautionary measures, fortifying his private parts with a layer of steel. The story then travels back in time, several years prior to the fight between Olympus and Ericpile. Mariandel, then known as Roku, was a renowned martial arts athlete and was chosen by her father to be his successor. However, this caused tension between her and her eldest brother, who could not accept the succession, and eventually led to her being accused of murder when her father was found dead. In order to avoid further conflict, Roku chose to seal away her powers and leave her family. One day, she encountered a girl named Mariandel and was immediately smitten, falling in love with her at first sight. However, the girl suffered from a deadly chronic illness, and Mariandel begged Roku to leave her and lead a better life. Despite the request, she refused to abandon her love and stayed by Mariandel's side until she passed away. In tribute to her beloved, Roku took on the name of Mariandel and lived as her, preserving the memory of all that she had done for her. As Hokaze learned more about Mariandel's past, he became more cautious in his interactions with her and began treating her as a true woman. He felt nervous whenever she approached him or lay next to him, fearing that she would lose control and cheat on the girl he once loved. However, it turned out that all those concerns were baseless, as the stories were just fabrications created to deceive him. In reality, Mariandel had transformed into a woman of her own volition. Meanwhile, at Holga's religious association, the members are discussing Ericpile's defeat in his duel against the amateur youth, Hokaze. They suspect that he may be the prophesied Hyperion hero, and see him as a key player in their plan to overthrow the Saint Empire. To this end, they plan to send a fearsome monster to attack both Princess Scarlet and Hokaze. The monster in question is Jord, a hulking orc with muscles rippling under his skin, who serves as a killing machine that knows only how to tear and slice human flesh. He has secretly trailed Princess Scarlet's army as they march towards the capital, biding his time for the perfect moment to strike. One day, Princess Scarlet displayed a strange sign. A crest appeared on her forehead, and her demeanor changed drastically, becoming highly sensitive. Meanwhile, Saint Elaine and Mariandel warned Hokaze to not interfere with Princess Scarlet and to follow all of her commands, as dire consequences would ensue if her authority was not respected. That night, as Mariandel was busy preparing food, Jord seized the opportunity to launch his attack. However, she swiftly defeated him and kicked him out of the kitchen. On the other hand, Jord then entered Princess Scarlet's chambers, intent on killing her. But in a shocking turn of events, Princess Scarlet, in a state of fury, became a one-woman army and reduced Jord to a mere punching bag. The Olga Religious Association's plan was thwarted, and their attempt to take the life of Princess Scarlet was unsuccessful. The next day, Hokaze and the rest of the group made their way to the renowned Alma Hot Springs. They relished in the relaxing soak, until Ericpile arrived to tend to his wounds. Hokaze scrambled to hide from his opponent's gaze. As Hokaze was soaking in the hot water, his body suddenly emitted a bright light, causing him to panic and try to soak himself in the hot spring again to extinguish it. But instead, he found himself face to face with Ericpile, who was also bathing there. Ericpile revealed to him that the source of the light was not from the hot water, but from the energy of Almagear, which was imbued in the magic sword he possessed. Shortly after, Ericpile issued another challenge for a duel with Hokaze, but Hokaze decided to take a different approach. Instead of accepting the challenge, he struck Ericpile with a broom handle and quickly fled the hot springs with Saint Elaine and the others. Due to the active Alma energy within Hokaze, his body was constantly emitting a bright light, forcing him to cover himself entirely with clothes. However, this only drew more attention to him and his unusual attire. He also struggled to eat in public as every time he opened his mouth, a brilliant light would shine forth. When Hokaze and his companions arrived in a bustling city, the citizens were wary of Hokaze's unusual appearance. They demanded that he remove his disguises, and as they peeled off the bandages covering his body, they were shocked to find that Hokaze emitted a brilliant light. They viewed him as a divine being and immediately began to worship him as a holy person. Hokaze played along, pretending to be a messenger of the gods, and even performed miraculous feats such as creating a well with his sword that could transform into a massive mace. The citizens were convinced that Hokaze was indeed a divine messenger, and they treated him as such. However, Saint Elaine, one of Hokaze's companions, was aware of the dangerous situation they were in. He advised Hokaze not to get too caught up in the charade and urged him to leave the city before the truth was uncovered. At first, Hokaze lived a life of fame and fortune, but as his followers grew in number, reaching hundreds of thousands, he realized the burden that came with it. Along with Princess Scarlet and their companions, he devised a clever plan to escape the city and start anew. They boarded a hot air balloon and set off into the sky, promising to return to the Sky Imperial Palace one day. With a sense of relief and liberation, he bid farewell to the town and began a new journey. As Hokaze traveled, a mysterious woman by the name of Alma Flora caught up with him. Flora, who had been keeping an eye on Hokaze, approached Eric Pyle after a long absence to give him something special. She led him to a place where a wise animal named Takumi would craft a new sword for him. Once the sword was complete, she enchanted it with a magic crystal and presented it to Eric Pyle with a warning to never let it leave his side again. At that time, Eric Pyle was in search of a loyal warrior to serve as his chief bodyguard and chose to hold a tournament to find the strongest knight among his troops. The challenge was to defeat a dragon, and the winner would be appointed as his right-hand man and lead Incognito's army in battle. However, the dragon proved to be too powerful, with the ability to regenerate. Eric Pyle was left with no choice but to face the beast alone, wielding the newly activated magic sword gifted to him by Flora. With a single stroke, the sword proved its might and defeated the dragon, causing a powerful explosion that radiated far and wide. Days later, Eric Pyle and his troops caught up with Hokaze and launched an attack, armed with the latest magic swords. The knights accompanying Eric Pyle also carried Almagir's swords, granting them even greater strength in combat. There, Sanglain and Mariandel were quickly overpowered by the enhanced Eric Pyle troops, as was Hokaze, who found himself locked in a fierce sword fight with Eric Pyle. The intense force of the clash between Eric Pyle's and Hokaze's swords resulted in the ground shaking beneath their feet, causing Hokaze and his companions to tumble into the depths of a cliff. Soon after, Eric Pyle's troops searched through the rubble and only managed to capture Mariandel, taking her captive. Hiding in the midst of the forest, Hokaze, Sanglain, and Princess Scarlet had also taken a hostage, a male knight from Eric Pyle's army named Leon. However, recognizing that holding Leon captive would only create more problems, Hokaze made the decision to release him, earning Eric Pyle's respect. As a gesture of gratitude, he aided in freeing Mariandel, but challenged Hokaze to a continued battle at the old castle atop a cliff. As the night fell, Eric Pyle and his troops arrived at the abandoned castle where they believed Hokaze was hiding. However, as soon as they entered the castle, they were caught in a trap set by Hokaze. Determined to finish the fight, Eric Pyle searched for Hokaze, and when he finally found him, he unleashed a powerful attack, expecting to defeat Hokaze once and for all. But to his surprise, Hokaze and Princess Scarlet were nowhere to be found and had seemingly been obliterated by the attack. Eric Pyle became suspicious of Hokaze's sudden disappearance, and sent some of his men to keep an eye on Sanglain and Mariandel, who they believed would be the first to make contact with Hokaze and Princess Scarlet if they were still alive. But as time passed, there was no sign of them, and his men found no evidence of their survival. One of Eric Pyle's subordinates, Gustav, decided to get to the bottom of the mystery and approached Mariandel at a bar. There, she broke the news to him that Hokaze and Princess Scarlet had fallen, and were no longer with him. The news was a heavy blow to Gustav and the rest of Eric Pyle's troops, as they realized that their fight was truly over and that their foes were gone for good. Feeling empathetic towards Mariandel's loss, Gustav offered to buy her drinks, and even allowed her to release her frustration by hitting him. After gathering enough information, Gustav and his comrades decided to leave the tavern and report back to Eric Pyle, while Sanglain and Mariandel paid their final respects at the graves of Scarlet and Hokaze atop a hill. However, as Sanglain and Mariandel continued on their journey through the desert, they stumbled upon Hokaze and Princess Scarlet, who were, to their surprise, very much alive. The supposed deaths of them were merely a ruse, part of their plan to put an end to Eric Pyle's disturbing presence and the ongoing war. Unbeknownst to Eric Pyle, when he launched his attack on the castle, he did not actually kill anyone. The two figures he encountered were mere illusions created by a giant mirror they had set up. Hokaze and the others never expected him to fall for such a simple trick, but they were relieved that he would no longer bother them. A few days later, Hokaze was exploring the city on his own when he crossed paths with a young woman named Miranda. She was a hopeless romantic, and upon laying eyes on him, she immediately fell head over heels for him. Unfortunately for him, the encounter took a turn for the worse. While wandering the city center, Hokaze suddenly developed a painful stomach ache. In search of a doctor, he was confronted by an irate Miranda. Her vivid imagination had led her to believe that he was being unfaithful with another woman named Mariandel. In a fit of rage, she attacked him with a sword. However, in the heat of the moment, Miranda swung her sword carelessly and ended up tearing Mariandel's clothing, exposing her breasts. Embarrassed by her actions, Miranda fled the scene. Hokaze was left with a fracture in his groin, but thankfully, it was a minor injury and he was able to make a full recovery. One day, Miranda resumed her pursuit of Hokaze, this time armed with an iron chain. At that time, he tried to flee in terror, but his escape was unsuccessful. When Miranda finally caught up with him, she implored him to understand her actions and confessed her feelings for him. Miranda challenged Hokaze to a duel in a field, and despite his best efforts, he was unable to defend himself against her lightning-fast and aggressive strikes. In the end, he was defeated and forced to kneel in front of her. In a cruel twist, even though Hokaze had never expressed any romantic interest in her, Miranda rejected his supposed love declaration and left him in defeat, hoping that she would leave him alone from then on. The following day, Hokaze and his companions were preparing to set sail for the capital, but they were faced with unexpected blackmail from the harbor captains. Princess Scarlet suggested that they travel by land so she could stop at Nanripat City for some sweets. Despite the longer journey, they agreed to the change in plans and Hokaze saw it as an opportunity to find a way back to the human world. As they were getting ready to leave, Hokaze suddenly needed to use the restroom. He searched the alleyways for a public toilet and stumbled upon a surprising discovery. He overheard their pet monkey, Blue, speaking in a human-like voice and believed it was communicating with someone. However, as he approached Blue, the monkey responded by spitting food in his face after Hokaze jostled it. On the other hand, Leon and Variation, who happened to be in the city, spotted Hokaze washing the food off his face at a nearby fountain. They were shocked to see him, as they thought he had died. After cleaning his face, Hokaze confronted Blue and demanded to know what he was up to. He subjected Blue to intense interrogation, including submerging his face in water and whipping him. Eventually, Blue was forced to reveal the truth and admitted that he was an incarnation of Hokaze's father, sent to watch over him and equipped with a magic pouch filled with tools for communication. However, Hokaze was not convinced and believed that Blue was merely trying to deceive him. He resumed his torture, threatening Blue with even more punishment. Eric Pyle, who happened to pass by and see him on a horse-drawn carriage, could only sigh and shake his head at what he believed was Hokaze's delusional behavior. After a long journey, the travelers finally reached the royal capital. At the palace, Princess Scarlet's fiancé, Nabokov Juglaberk, met with King St. Pyria. The rumors of the princess's death had reached Nabokov's ears, but the king vehemently denied them and assured him that she was alive and well. Upon her arrival, Princess Scarlet requested the token of her engagement to Prince Nabokov and asked the king about how to return humans to the human world. King St. Pyria suggested that she go to the West Tower building to consult with the royal astrologers. Without wasting a moment, the princess made her way to the designated location. As Hokaze made his way through the underground passage, he ran into Blue once again. Blue was now leading a secret anti-imperial organization that aimed to bring about change. While attempting to overhear the organization's meetings, they were caught by the leader. To their surprise, there were 3 separate anti-kingdom organizations operating in the same underground passage. With the leaders of the organizations suspecting a traitor among them and engaged in a heated argument, Hokaze and Blue seized the opportunity to make their escape. They fled to the West Tower building where they met a male astrologer. The astrologer confessed that he did not have the means to return Hokaze to his home world, but a mysterious woman's voice from behind the curtain offered hope. She said that Hokaze could find a way to return in the kingdom of Juglaberk. As Hokaze opened the balcony curtains to meet the woman face to face, she suddenly vanished. In her place, he saw a floating city in the sky called Alvidia. With the mysterious woman's advice ringing in his ears, Hokaze set out for kingdom of Juglaberk. With a royal maid in tow. For some reason, he felt that the maid's face was familiar, like someone he had encountered before. Along with Prince Nabokov and his troops, Hokaze boarded a plane and set off for the kingdom. Meanwhile, Eric Pyle received the news that Hokaze and Princess Scarlet were still alive and had returned to the St. Pyria kingdom. Upon learning that Hokaze was in the capital, Eric Pyle secretly sent Variation to follow him. At that time, Variation disguised himself as a crew member on Juglaberk's flying boat. As he peered into Hokaze's room, he was entertained by Hokaze's antics. However, Variation could no longer bear the absurdity and burst into the room, donning a disguise costume. But because Hokaze still suspected him, he was forced to shoot Hokaze with an anesthetic, rendering him unconscious. Meanwhile, as Hokaze, Blue, Sanglain, and Mariandel journeyed to the kingdom of Juglaberk on the flying ship, suspicions of an intruder on board arose. Nabokov's personal servant, Konitan, believed that the intruder was a member of the incognito organization seeking to sabotage the prince's engagement to Princess Scarlet. In disguise, Variation had infiltrated the ship, but his presence was soon discovered by the group. When Hokaze, Sanglane, and Mariandel all grew suspicious, Variation was forced to act and shot them with a tranquilizer. To his surprise, they all survived the attack, as they were wearing bulletproof vests. Even Princess Scarlet, who was also on the trip, managed to escape unscathed. As Variation's plan to eliminate the group fell apart, he became panicked and began plotting his escape. However, when he attempted to kill Princess Scarlet, he was dissuaded. When the wedding preparations began in the life for the time being, deciding to let her endure the suffering of her arranged union. However, he made it clear that he would return to finish what he had started. As the wedding date approached, there was a flurry of activity in the kingdom as the couple was set to undergo 18 traditional pre-wedding rituals before the ceremony took place. Despite the joyous occasion, Princess Scarlet was still haunted by the thought of her future and the life she would have to lead. On the other hand, determined to explore the floating city of Aldivia, Hokaze was met with disappointment when the guards informed him that it was off-limits for ordinary humans. Blue, seeing his determination, suggested visiting the Ixion Center, a research facility where he might find answers. Upon arrival at the lobby, Hokaze mentioned that he had been referred to as a Hyperion hero, which immediately raised suspicion and led to his arrest for further questioning. In the interrogation room, he found himself face to face with Alan Yodogawa, the chief scientist and head of the Ixion Center. Alan probed Hokaze about his ability to control Alma's energy, which was a unique power only the true Hyperion was capable of wielding. To determine if he was indeed the legendary hero, Alan subjected him to a series of tests and examinations to analyze his body structure and abilities. However, after conducting the tests, Alan realized that Hokaze's body structure was no different from any other human. He needed to gather more information, so he questioned Hokaze about his experiences. When Hokaze asked Alan if he had ever been to Aldivia City, Alan responded by saying that it was just a mythical city believed to be inhabited by gods by the people of Juglaberg. As Alan prepared to perform another round of experiments, Hokaze, weakened from the previous tests, fought back and made a run for it. Back at the Incognito Knights headquarters, Variation discovered his friends punishing themselves as a form of punishment for their failure to capture Hokaze. Eric Pyle devised a new plan to keep tabs on Hokaze by infiltrating the territory of the Juglabruk kingdom. Meanwhile, Princess Scarlet and the rest of the team were undergoing preparations for a wedding ceremony. On the other hand, Hokaze, who was initially not interested in participating, changed his mind upon learning that the final rites would be held in the mythical city of Aldivia. At that time, he was curious about the final rite that Princess Scarlet had to undergo, but the wedding committee kept it a secret, leaving him to wait until the other rituals were completed. As one of her bodyguards, he was tasked with participating in the various rituals, which proved to be more challenging for him than for the other guards. Throughout the rituals, Hokaze was tasked with various odd tasks, such as climbing tree trunks over the river, arranging wooden dominoes, carving wooden swans, and drawing a pair of swans on white sand. Despite his best efforts, all of his works were destroyed as part of the ritual. Meanwhile, Eric Pyle and his troops arrived in the Juglaberg kingdom and began to gather information on Hokaze and Mariandel. As Eric Pyle and his troops reflected on their previous failed attempt to defeat Hokaze, they were determined to come up with a more calculated plan this time. They devised a scheme to sabotage one of the wedding rituals during Hokaze's nuptials, with the goal of both disrupting the wedding and capturing him. Despite their best efforts, their plan to distract Hokaze by having Variation and others bathe in the river near where he was surfing on a tree trunk was unsuccessful. Hokaze was unfazed and all their attempts to sabotage the wedding rituals proved fruitless. However, Eric Pyle, who had a meticulous personality, couldn't stand Hokaze's messy work and ended up taking the initiative to help him complete it. They even shook hands in a surprising display of reconciliation, leaving Eric Pyle's subordinates bewildered by his strange behavior. When the domino ritual approached, Eric Pyle and his troops attempted to buy all the dominoes in the city in an effort to prevent Hokaze from obtaining enough for the ritual. Unfortunately, their lack of funds and the rising prices of dominoes due to news of Nabokov's wedding left them unable to succeed. Suddenly, an old man claiming to be a black market dealer offered them dominoes at a lower price. As Variation negotiated with the old man, Hokaze and Mariandel arrived to purchase the dominoes, leading to a heated argument between Mariandel and Eric Pyle over the old man. Just as the 14th marriage ritual was successfully completed, Princess Scarlet's mysterious illness suddenly returned, even though the final ritual was only 2 days away. As a crest appeared on her head, Sanglane and Mariandel became frantic, quickly granting Scarlet's wishes in an effort to prevent her from going berserk. Princess Scarlet's first request was to go to a karaoke club and sing for a few hours. During Princess Scarlet's turn to sing, Hokaze and the others were subjected to intense pain in their ears due to her horribly off-key performance. Thankfully, once her request was fulfilled, the crest on her head disappeared and everything returned to normal. As the final ritual approached, all eyes were fixed on the meeting between Princess Scarlet and Prince Nabokov in the royal hall. However, they were disappointed to learn that the Aldivia ritual was merely a standard ceremony and not connected to the city of Aldivia, causing Hokaze's plans to visit there to be scrapped. After the wedding ceremony, Princess Scarlet and Nabokov retired to his bedroom for their first night together. To everyone's surprise, instead of a romantic evening, Nabokov was occupied with playing with hand puppets and asked Princess Scarlet to dress up as a doll. Meanwhile, Hokaze, fearing for Princess Scarlet's safety, was pacing nervously in his room, questioning whether Nabokov was truly a good man. Just as they were about to go to sleep, her illness flared up, causing her 3 crests to rise, leading her to go on a wild rampage and attack Nabokov so violently that their room was destroyed. With grave concern for Princess Scarlet, Hokaze and the group rushed to her room, but instead, they discovered Nabokov unconscious under the mattress. In a moment of confusion, Hokaze was holding onto Nabokov's leg, and this led to a misunderstanding by the Juglaberk royal troops, who saw him as a threat to their prince. The situation escalated quickly, leading to an unavoidable confrontation between Hokaze and the Juglaberk army. In their bid to escape the pursuing Juglaberk troops, Hokaze and the team found refuge in a nearby forest where they ran into Ericpile and his army. Taking advantage of the situation, Hokaze and his friends convinced Ericpile to help fight against the Juglaberk army and save themselves. Suddenly, a curious onlooker asked the reason behind Princess Scarlet's attack on Nabokov, to which she replied that it was because of his protruding nose hairs. As the events unfolded, it was revealed that the true culprit behind the turmoil was a spy sent by the Ulga Religious Alliance. The aim of the spy was to cause a rift between the Kingdom of Juglaberk and the Kingdom of St. Pyria by placing fake nose hairs on Nabokov. This caused Princess Scarlet to lash out at the prince, leading to the kingdoms severing their ties and preparing for war. The battle between the Ericpile army and the Juglaberk army was followed by a strange twist of events. Hokaze, along with Ericpile and his troops, were suddenly transported to another dimension. After spending a few seconds in his own room, Hokaze was brought back to the world of Isekai and reunited with Flora. He soon realized that she was the one who had asked for his help in an online game, and that she was the one who brought him to this. At that time, Hokaze was curious as to how he ended up in this strange world and turned to Flora for answers. She revealed that she had summoned him using an ancient technique, but warned him that the mission ahead was dangerous and could cost him his life. Despite his initial hesitation, he agreed to help Flora and was later informed by Blue that she had sent him to observe his powers. As Hokaze and his friends were confronted by Ericpile and his troops, Flora stepped in to stop the conflict from escalating. She explained the history of the Ixion dimension, a floating realm with advanced technology and civilization. However, the once thriving society was torn apart by a competition fueled by Alma's energy, leading to a civil war that resulted in its destruction. Years after the destruction of the Ixion dimension, rumors surfaced about a mysterious man who had the power to recreate it. To achieve his goal, he sought to create a rift between the pro-Rude and anti-imperial factions and overthrow the emperor. Aware of these rumors, Princess Scarlet agreed to a political marriage with Nabokov in an effort to prevent the outbreak of war. However, a misunderstanding in Nabokov's room on their wedding night caused a rift between the Kingdom of St. Pyria and the Kingdom of Juglaberk, putting the princess in an awkward position. Flora revealed that the chaos was actually orchestrated by a spy from the Olga Religious Union, led by the Archbishop. The Archbishop, a mysterious figure, was the mastermind behind all the chaos, using the anti-kingdom faction to destroy the empire and establish a new civilization. Meanwhile, Ericpile was left feeling betrayed when he discovered the truth. Soon after, Flora summoned Hokaze and Ericpile to the Ixion dimension with a mission to defeat the Archbishop. Realizing that a normal fighter or knight wouldn't be able to defeat such a powerful opponent, she used Alma's power to imbue everyone she summoned with Hyperion powers. She also had the Alma Gear weapon, obtained from the remains of the previous era's civil war, at the ready. Getting their hands on the Alma Gear weapons involved a bit of a learning curve, as the group was unfamiliar with the gacha machine. But after some trial and error, Hokaze pointed out that all they needed to do was insert coins into the machine. Armed with their new weapons, Flora returned everyone to their original locations. Before Hokaze was sent back, he asked about reaching Aldivia, but Flora told him that the location was sealed and couldn't be accessed until the seal was broken. As the battle between the Kingdom of Juggleberg and the Kingdom of St. Pyria began, Hokaze and his friends raced to the front lines to engage the enemy troops. During the battle, Mariandel stumbled upon her older brother, who was working as a mercenary for the Juggleberg royal army. Meanwhile, Princess Scarlet also had an unexpected encounter with her older brother, who was fighting on the side of Juggleberg in an attempt to take control of the St. Pyria region. Thus, Hokaze and his companions decided to temporarily retreat from the battle due to the overwhelming enemy forces, making victory impossible against Princess Scarlet's brother. Saint-Gelaine suggested they take on the Archbishop directly, but when they encountered the Olga Religious Union's troops, they found themselves facing Saint-Gelaine's older brother instead. Meanwhile, the Archbishop, who had gotten wind of the group's plan to attack him, dispatched Obrian's army to stop them. The following day, as Hokaze and his friends were setting out to reach the Olga Religious Association, he suddenly collapsed after being bitten by a venomous spider. Meanwhile, Eric Pyle and his troops had already arrived at the Archbishop's headquarters and informed him that Princess Scarlet and her forces were making preparations to bring an end to the war. Upon hearing this, the Archbishop ordered Eric Pyle and his troops to stand ready and await further instructions, as he had already sent Obrian's army to handle the situation. Not long after, Eric Pyle received a distress call from Variation and Gustav, who reported that they had been attacked by Obrian's army. Gustav saved Variation from near death with his healing abilities. Upon hearing this news, Kate, one of Eric Pyle's men, made a shocking revelation to him, that she was actually a woman, despite presenting as male all this time. Eric Pyle was taken aback, as he and Kate had shared many intimate moments, including bathing and rubbing each other's backs. Meanwhile, Hokaze had made a full recovery with the help of Flora, who revealed that he had been cursed with bad luck. To lift the curse, they would need to undergo a special ritual. He was placed into a large cauldron and boiled over high heat, but he was unable to break free on his own. Flora came to his aid, making it seem as though he had destroyed the cauldron by himself. The following day, St. Pyria's and Juggleberg's armies arrived at the battlefield, ready to engage in battle. Hokaze and his companions rushed to the site to intervene, but their journey was abruptly interrupted by Obrian's army, led by Archbishop Ali, who appeared to be a horde of soulless undead. However, when Ali gave the order to attack, the troops transformed back into normal humans. Despite Obrian's army's formidable combat strength, Hokaze and his friends were able to defeat them thanks to their newfound powers of Hyperion. However, their victory was bittersweet as they realized that their fight against Obrian's army had delayed their arrival at the battlefield, and they might be too late to prevent a war between St. Pyria and Juggleberg. Fortunately, Eric Pyle and his team defected from the Olga Guild and joined forces with Princess Scarlet to put an end to the conflict. In a swift and decisive battle, Eric Pyle and his troops were able to overpower Obrian's forces and defeat their leader, Ali. As the St. Pyria and Juggleberg armies were about to engage in battle, Hokaze and his companions stepped in, using a loudspeaker to call for a ceasefire. At that time, he proclaimed himself to be a Hyperion hero, sent to maintain peace in the world, and demanded that all soldiers lay down their weapons. However, Nabokov refused to listen and ordered his troops to attack Hokaze with tank engines. But to his surprise, Hokaze effortlessly destroyed the tanks. Still skeptical, he challenged Hokaze to prove his abilities as a Hyperion. With Hokaze's display of power, both armies were quick to bow before him, recognizing the authority of the Hyperion and the will of the gods. The soldiers from both kingdoms agreed to withdraw and put an end to the war, and Eric Pyle made plans to bring Kings St. Pyria and Nabokov together to sign a peace treaty. However, the Archbishop, seeing his plan to pit the two kingdoms against each other had failed, resorted to a backup plan. He controlled the hairy Titan monster Ferezzo and ordered it to destroy Aldivia City, which had been conjured by Flora. But little did the Archbishop know, the city was just a facade created by Flora using a giant balloon, causing Ferezzo to go berserk and lose control. Soon after, Eric Pyle and his men launched a coordinated attack on Ferezzo, aimed at knocking him off balance, but the effort proved fruitless. Undeterred, Hokaze stepped in and tried a different approach. He spoke to Ferezzo through a loudspeaker, calmly explaining the error of his ways. At that moment, Ferezzo listened and eventually apologized, leading to them forming a close friendship. In accordance with Hokaze's orders, Kings St. Pyria and Nabokov were appointed and soon signed a peace treaty, bringing an end to the conflict. With peace established, Eric Pyle turned his attention to bringing justice to the Archbishop, who had been spreading propaganda and committing crimes. He was promptly arrested and locked up in a dungeon, where he remained for a long time. Meanwhile, Obrian's troops were subjected to years of forced labor as punishment for their role in the conflict. The following night, Hokaze and Furetsu encountered Ericpile once again as Hokaze sought to settle some unfinished business. The two sides clashed in a fierce battle, until one day Ericpile revealed the shocking truth behind his actions. He had been seeking revenge after losing his testicles. The revelation stunned everyone, including Ericpile's own men. Mariandel, moved by his plight, generously offered to donate her own testicles to complete his anatomy. Flora, with Alma's help, then performed the operation to transfer the testicular organs. At that moment, Ericpile gratefully thanked Mariandel for her kindness, and in return he put an end to the fight, bringing an end to the conflict. After all of this, Hokaze's journey to save the Isekai world from ruin had finally come to an end. With a heavy heart, he bid farewell to his friends and allies and was transported back to the human world with Flora's assistance. The anime ends on a joyful note as Hokaze arrives back in his own room unharmed. Ericpile regains his lost masculinity, and Mariandel undergoes a full transformation into a beautiful woman. The moral lesson of this anime is to never surrender in pursuit of a better future, not just for ourselves but also for future generations.